Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit buttons below on your screen and or phone. Yesterday, kind of went over some thoughts, fumblingly so, which is weird that I got so many new subscribers off that video. Oh, hi everybody. Just about whether or not D&D 5e is good or not, like the motivation behind why there's been this sudden recent trend towards people on YouTube and other platforms, tearing down some of the stuff that D&D's been doing with their revisions and the stuff they've been putting in their newer source books. And how, aside from, yes, a few cynical, opportunistic YouTubers here and there, the majority of the people who are complaining are doing so not because they hate D&D, but because they like D&D, if not love D&D, whether or not we're talking the 5th edition or just D&D in general. And so, the source of their anger and enmity isn't really so much that, like they want to see D&D destroyed and erased or anything like that. They just wanted to do better. And also mixed in with hey, maybe quit insulting your paying customers kind of a thing going on. The people who think D&D is bad are the crowd that D&D and other role-playing game companies are trying the hardest to win over and get them to buy their product. An audience that generally isn't prone to spending that kind of money anyway, on books. Books. The fuck are books to a person who's under 30 nowadays? And they're the ones that are saying that these games are bigoted and racist and based on bad, outmoded tropes and archaic ways of thinking and all that kind of stuff. And so, that's the irony. The people right now who currently are shilling hardest for D&D and its changes and how great it all is kind of fall into two categories. They're doing it just purely out of posturing, or they're doing it because they've managed to gain some sort of space in the YouTube sphere or on the D&D Beyond boards or in some form in the community. They've managed to gain some status, and they're terrified of losing it. So, they got these two things that they gotta stay, on the in with the people who are actually in control of this IP and run all the conventions and, all the stuff that comes downwind of Dungeons and Dragons, that in terms of public held events and all that kind of shit. But all these changes are being done because of people who are saying that this is a bad product. So there's the irony. The people who think this is the worst are the people that they're changing it for. The people who are complaining right now, they're clearly not listening because they're already responding to a different complaint. Your complaint is to not respond to their complaint, and they've already made that choice. And so, especially since companies tend to, because they're no longer run by a single human entity, they're all, based upon these contractual agreements and such. So once certain plans are set in motion, everyone there is obligated to carry it through, even if, midway in it starts to become, screamingly obvious that this isn't going to work. But, also because we live in a world where it's better to just go ahead and let it fail and declare bankruptcy than it is to admit that you've made a mistake and change your tactic, because, why would anyone want to hire you again? It's kind of a similar problem we have with politicians, religious leaders, all sorts of people in positions of power. Once they have that power, they themselves are afraid of admitting to wrong. That you can't, because why would you trust them? Why would you re-elect them? Why would you go to their church? Why would you buy their product if they've publicly admitted that they've made mistakes or that they had the wrong idea or they did something bad? In truth, some people might actually respond positively to that stuff, and you can see indications of that through the past. People like a humble leader. People like reluctant leaders on those rare occasions where we get them. But the whole concept of elite panic, which is in many ways explains a lot of what's going on in the world right now. They have it in their heads that they have to put out this constant appearance of like firm, we're in control, we're doing the right thing, don't question us. And so there's a lot of motivations to stick to their plans, even if it's actually going to end in ruin. And so that's why they're making all these alterations and posturing to cater to a group of kids, because our marketing culture is fascinated with constantly recruiting new generations of kids into the whole sales scheme of the country, if not the planet now at this point, let's be real. And so, like, it's been going on, like, the entire time I've been alive and watching things is, there's this cycle where for a while, it was all about baby boomers. When I was a little kid, there's all this stuff, pointed at baby boomers and references to baby boomers and movies that were kind of plays on the name and stuff. And then right around the time I was like in junior high, transitioning into high school, suddenly it was all Generation X, everything's Generation X. It's all extreme. Try our extreme new flavor and watch our extreme new movie. Which, I came in at the very tail end of being a Gen Xer. If I was like just a few years younger, I'd be one of the older millennials. So, I have a little bit of overlap with them in some ways, but I'm still on the Generation X side. And because when I was in high school, I'm constantly being told Generation X, Generation X, Generation X. I've always just kind of had that imprinted on me. And then a little bit after 9/11, suddenly everything became about millennials. Oh my God, what are the millennials thinking? Are the millennials going to vote? What do they think about George Bush and his policies in the Middle East? It was just millennial. Hey, did you know that millennials are more atheistic than any other previous generation? Oh my God, millennial. And now we're in the beginnings of Zoomer times, which I guess we've settled on Zoomer. I don't know if that's supposed to indicate antithesis to baby boomers or a signal that they're going to be baby boomer 2.0, since you got like why the repetition and naming style kind of a thing. Baby boomer comes from the baby boom, and like the word boom itself is, explosion. So like they're a generation that was like explosively, large and born in a short amount of time. Zoomers is like derived from Generation Z and or Generation Z, depending on which version of English you're speaking. And so it's in and of itself a pun. So, that's kind of a weird emergent name for a generation. We'll see if it sticks. But now everything's about them. And the thing is though, like, since the Bush administration years, there's been, like, these active efforts, like, to turn kids into activists. And it's easy to think that there's some sort of nefarious behind the background political scheme going on there. And to some degree, there might be a little bit of that, but... I'm a believer in chaos theory, and I do believe in the idea of emergent patterns and the fact that you can have things that happen in society that really look like a conspiracy, but it's just because a lot of people are all basically having the exact same reaction to something and doing the exact same thing in tandem. So it kind of creates this illusion that there's some great plot going on afoot, but... it's just people being people under certain circumstances. And the thing is like, as of the early 21st century, like, what exactly are you, if you're being honest about, what life is really like to children, which is something as a society we just don't do. I mean, just look at the whole giant lie of Santa Claus every fucking year. We don't want to tell them the truth. We don't want them to be depressed, especially after Columbine. It's like, oh, we got to really worry about their self-esteem and how they feel about themselves. We don't want them to be bummed out. But like, what do you tell them they're going to do for a living? Like, there's only so many like actual real jobs to be had that are more than just your basic bitch service kind of jobs. I mean, telling people like, yeah, you're going to grow up to be a custodian or you're going to work at a burger joint, like that's not a message of positivity. I mean, kids are told when they're little that, you get to be anything you want when you grow up, and you're going to be president one day, son, all that kind of shit. Or you're going to be the first girl president, all that kind of shit. So like what the teachers aren't can't tell them what's real. That like that regardless of the size of the population, you only need so many architects, you only need so many politicians, you only need so many painters, you only need so many actors. Uh, so activism is kind of like make work, and at the time this all started, there was like this general attitude. I mean, we are talking just a few years right before Obama got elected. There was this kind of like attitude that like for the most part, most of America's troubled past had largely been settled legally, and yes, it would still take some time for it to fully ripple its way through the population so that everyone's kind of accepted it and is on the same page. But like at least in terms of the paperwork, most of this shit's been fixed. There might be a few things here and there. So like why not just like turn the kids into activists, and then they can feel like they're doing something, pretending to fight for civil rights again or something. Gay people want to get married. Maybe go like protest for that or something. Yeah, and here we are all these years later. Several years before I met my wife, I like had tried going out with a girl who's a bit younger in her 20s, and there was just at one point in like one of the last conversations we had where she had said something about how she'd been an activist and she was 14, and my immediate response was. If anything you've been since you were 14, like probably isn't really a thing. If you're able to be an activist at the age of 14, like how does that mean anything? Like if you have no legal rights or standing basically when you're that age. You're still an unformed little pupae, still waiting to hatch and become a butterfly. You're past your caterpillar stage, but hey. You're still in that transition. Like that's not a good time to be trying to like influence the world that you have no understanding of. I mean, if you like look throughout history, like back in ancient times, like a lot of fucked up shit happened because of a propensity of having like teenagers basically being in charge of society because of the ages people could become king and what they used to consider adulthood back in the Bronze Age and shit. So, there's a there is logic behind like not allowing people under a certain age to vote, and like if you can't vote, you really like what's the point of being a fucking activist? Besides that, you're just trying to guilt trip your parents. There's been all this stuff in like cartoons starting from the 90s onward that if you noticed, I noticed it right around the time I was getting out of high school that the cartoons like my generation had watched as kid, like most of the main characters were adults. G.I. Joe, that was all adults. The Transformers, when they came to Earth, were hanging out with adults. Like the Ninja Turtles were about maybe like as young as you got, and they were still like older teenagers who were also like hung out with adults and respected their adults. Splinter wasn't some goofball who didn't know anything. But then there was like this switch got flipped, and suddenly like all kids shows were about kids, and there's this common theme about like how the adults around them was like don't know what the fuck they're doing or actively being antagonistic, and so you combine all these things together and like go figure that the modern crop of kids who grew up on all that shit kind of have these attitudes they have, thinking that like the world's coming down, apocalypse around every corner, trained, actively told to like agitate and find things that are wrong and start making noise like we gotta fix this, guys. So anyway, just bundle all that up and then aim those people. Now they've discovered Dungeons and Dragons thanks to Netflix and Cartoon Network. Rick and Morty and Stranger Things have sent them over, and now we're kind of stuck with them. Role players are actually pretty damn inclusive. I mean, yes, like, I certainly have memories of, all sorts of, like, things that are extremely negative right now. Things being said by people back in, like, the old days and such. But that wasn't, like, the majority of people. Most gamers are polite. Most of them are socially awkward, if not outright social outcasts. And enjoy the opportunity to have, more people to be exposed to. That's one of the whole main reasons of being in the hobby. Back before the internet, role-playing games was like a core essential way for socially awkward nerds to be able to have an excuse and an activity to go hang out with other socially awkward nerds. And the internet muddies the waters on that, let's say, a little bit. But it was good motivations that were like, it was like, oh, all these new kids of this new generation want to get into role-playing games. Sure, come on in. Not realizing that you're bringing a bunch of poisoned, trained activists into your hobby, and your niceness is kind of damned you. There's a lot of stuff out there in the zeitgeist on right-wing entertainment YouTube, kind of coming from people like Arch and Razor Fist primarily, from what I can see, and for like who says the stuff first and then who talks about it later. But about gatekeeping. We got to start gatekeeping, everybody. It's too fucking late. Like, Troy's on fire. The horse is already dragged in. The Greeks have snuck out of it. They've already stabbed a bunch of people in their sleep. The city's lost, guys. The hobby itself, you can't actually destroy this hobby because, the rules are easy to recreate on your own. We barely need the books. We barely need them. The books are, for game masters, a time-saving device so that, especially if you have a life outside of just playing with your hobby, if you got a job or you got to go to school or you got kids or anything else, you don't necessarily have time to come up with stories and settings and plots and villain stats and all that kind of stuff. So the books are a resource for dungeon masters, but, if you're, put in a corner and you got nothing, but you still have at least, a little bit of paper, and something you can use as a randomizing agent if you don't actually have dice or can't whittle up, some dice with some wood or some shit on your own. God forbid you figure out how to cut a cube out of wood. You can recreate these things really easily. One of the things that surprised me after I started putting books out is I was expecting people to be bitching about the rule system I had slapped together for my games. Because, it's just a real simplistic, very derivative of White Wolf in the 90s, but, way simplified kind of rule dynamic and way characters are broken down by, attributes and skills and stuff. And I've had, zero pushback. In fact, I've had the opposite. I've had, multiple people who've bought the product say, this is now one of their favorite rule systems. And, are planning, it's... if you can talk to Shauner Films or DM Kurt, down in the comments, or if you can go find their YouTube channel about that. It's I can't really speak to what their experiences were myself, but or why they particularly like what I did, but I was expecting someone to come and try to tear that stuff down, because I largely just kind of made it up as I went when I was writing the first book, Escape from Planet Matriarchy. It's not like I spent months crafting this and then playtesting with others. I'm just familiar enough with role-playing games and their mechanics that, here's just this real simple, easy-to-use thing you can slap in this that you don't even have to use. You can also just use my books as just kind of an adventure outline with another system if you want. Kind of a thing. So, I'm shocked that people liked it as much, but, all that aside, what I'm saying is that, that's what I mean. You can just make up role-playing game rules to suit your needs. You don't need this stuff. Characters need some just, the most basic stats to cover, the major realms of what they're capable of doing. You can add, put some layers of special abilities on them that are, uniquely crafted so they all feel like they're contributing something unique to the group. A basic tree of skills to cover the sorts of activities that they're going to be doing in game, and figure out some what exactly is the dynamic for damage and hit points, and that if you have all that covered, you can come up with your own rules. Try not to make too many things that don't directly attach to shit on the character sheet, and you're good to go. We don't actually need any of this stuff. So the fact that it's being burnt down is not the end of the world. You can still play role-playing games. You can, and not all. There's other cities, you know. Like D&D is not the only city. Obviously, it's Paizo City. It's pretty close to D&D, so you know it's starting to like see some whiffs of smoke coming up from it. Let's say, and is likely to like come down too, because you know. Here's the thing. Going back, that I know that some of you who are OSR fans really don't like, you know, when I say it, but OSR is always going to be living in D&D's shadow, and so as goes D&D, will go OSR. I for a variety of reasons, just I don't see OSR ever being able to replace D&D. I could be wrong. It'd be cool if I was wrong. I just have my doubts. But you know, Palladium, they're still like putting out the books as they were, all flaws included, which is cool. You know, as much as some people want to dog on them for a variety of reasons, I can't think of another role-playing game company that's older than them that didn't go away for a while and come back. You know, if Palladium had some skeezy stuff happen during that little 10 to 15 year gap where the role-playing game industry nearly died, I just chalk that up to the kind of shit you got to do to keep your fucking company running when no one's buying role-playing games. So, but you know, it's still their original OG product, which is cool, and I'm kind of glad to see slowly like more people kind of perking up to Palladium again. You know, I think people are slowly awakening to the fact that there's other things out there to play. But like the problem is like all the bigger companies are also under threat of you know, catching fire. They're also under threat of, you know, being stormed by these like know-nothing kids and burning the house down. So support independent creators as much as possible. I am a bit self-serving by saying that, but there's a logic to it as well, because I'm hardly the only one. People who are entirely free of any sort of corporate demands, you know, can give you products and ideas that, you know, would never make it through the filter of, you know, like mass marketing. So, you know, check me out, check out other independent creators. You know, you don't know what, you know, you might find something cool, you know, even if it's something you don't want to run, it might give you ideas. And, you know, that's another thing, that role-playing game books are actually what they're selling you is just inspiration for a bunch of ideas of things you can do. Whether or not you even use them exactly as they're written, if it still inspires a train of thought that manifests in you doing something in one of your games, you got your money's worth out of it to some degree or another, depending on how much it cost. But, you know, like Modifius is clearly corrupted, and by extension Onyx Press. You know, Artel Saurian, you know, they're a company that's clearly taken a side and is allowing themselves to be infected. And like they've had issues with people bitching about like, you know, like you know, accepting cyber parts and stuff. It's supposed to like kind of decrease your humanity or whatever the hell they called it in Cyberpunk. So you know, apparently that's an issue to some people who are like, "What are you saying, that trans people are less human?" Which is just, it's leaping on just the slightest little thing and trying to take the absolutely worst faith interpretation of what's being said, just to like make some fucking fake ass show about, you know, how good you are. You know, you can gatekeep the independents, and there's some like smaller outlier companies and more renegade companies that are still like, you know, that they're small and they have their audience, and that audience isn't super woke. So, you know, they can afford to still like put out the more edgier OG shit. It's weird that the old school plain D&D is now edgy. And that the edgy companies like White Wolf are now the ones that are like, you know, simping for fucking, you know, corporate plans about how we're just gonna smooth everyone over like glass so that we can all have equal credit ratings and have credit cards. You know, I mean, so much of all the shit that's going on in terms of, you know, the world, the big plots, you know, it's not, you know, attempts to genocide people, of whoever you think is being genocided. It's all about the banks wanting to expand the amount of people who have credit cards, because the more people that are in debt to them, the more credit they have, and this whole weird chain of money is debt. that we have going on the planet. So, you know, if they're like real conspiracies are almost always traced back to money. You just kind of keep that little nugget in your head for your adventure writing. So I mean, yeah, we might still be able to gatekeep Palladium a little bit. Maybe not though. Savage Worlds and the fact that he hired in the guy from Savage Worlds. At first, I thought Savage Worlds was kind of cool, but the more I've like actually been had a time to like look through what's actually in the Savage World Rifts books, the more I'm like, this is lackluster and redundant. And arguably when you like play out like the long term events of what Savage Rifts setting is doing versus what the OG Palladium Rifts setting is doing right now, currently in the same point in their timeline. The Savage Rifts is actually going to lead to a much worse situation for you know. But right now it looks, you know, better and more heroic than what's going on in Palladium, perhaps. I don't know, just more stupid politics. I don't know. I guess, you know, yeah, so you can gatekeep independence. There's a few small companies you might be able to gatekeep. Most of the larger ones are going to, you know, like, the ship's sinking, you know, like, you can only bail out so much before you just got to realize that you got to get off the boat and find something else. Unfortunately, because of the nature of our investment system, like, you know, any call to like, wait, we should just start our own company, guys. It'll just end up being filtered through the exact same corrupting process that's happened to all these other ones. So you know, you have a choice. You know, you can make a firm stand about you're just not going to play with any of this crap anymore, and you just go to, you know, the most obscure thing you can find that no one's bitching about yet, and just try to like hold on to that hill until the mob finally comes for you. Or you can just like learn to ignore it, or figure out exactly what it would mean to resist, because like, you know, the country's invaded. You know, France has fallen. You know, the Waffen SS is like marching down the streets of Paris. Your chance at gatekeeping with your Maginot Line completely failed. And saying that, like, we got to gatekeep, guys, 5 years later, like, I'm sorry, I know, like, you know, like, I like watching their videos. I mean, this isn't like some like horrible spear of like, you know, fuck Razor Fist or fuck Arch, but it's fucking too late, guys. Like, you maybe should have brought this shit up a long time ago. Maybe you kind of did, but no one was listening. But it's all like everyone's waited a little bit too long to wake up on this one, guys. You were ensorcelled by your own good natures of not wanting to, you know, it's not wanting to discourage kids from getting into the hobby. Like, why would any of us want to do that? You know, we're especially as we get older and get into those parental and mentor type age stages of our lives. The idea of being able to bring like a new crop of teens and college kids into the hobby, like, that's great. How could we know that they were gonna like eat it out from the inside like some sort of like, you know, acidic bile from the mouth of like one of the alien creatures or some shit? But is D&D bad? The only people who think that are, you know, are the people who like are being promoted the most. So I'm not exactly sure what we're supposed to do about that, aside from just like, okay, guys, it's just time to just get the fuck out of here. There are other cities, there are the small towns. There's other hills to die upon than this stupid fucking Tolkien ripoff anyway. So I don't know what to tell you. Why are you still here? I said I don't know what to tell you. Jesus, weirdo.